What should you be trying to improve in supply chain and logistics in 2026? That's what we're going to be looking at this week, and I'm going to share some tips on what people think they should be trying to improve and what I think they should be. Coming right up. Okay, so welcome back to the channel. What I thought I'd do this week is something a little bit different. We're going to look at what people are planning to improve on or what they've been trying to improve on this year. We're going to look at what people think they need to improve, and then what I think they ought to be looking at sort of shorter term and longer term, if that makes sense. So I'm actually going to use a graphic to talk through this, so you don't have to look at me for the whole video. If you're not aware, it's obvious at the background there. My day job is actually running a consulting company called Logistics Bureau. And so what I'm going to be sharing is some of the things that we've been involved in at Logistics Bureau and kind of what people are focusing on. And I'm going to give some tips at the end where if you really want to try and improve things for 2026, I'll suggest my top 3 things to look at. So let's get the slide up so you can have a look at that. Okay, so let me explain this diagram to begin with. So here at Logistics Bureau, this is all the kind of stuff that we get involved in. And I thought this might be a useful kind of prop to use, because what I'm going to step through is what people are asking us to do at the moment, what they think they need to be improving on. And some of that is pretty obvious and quite right. And then I'm going to talk about what I think people should be looking at in the short to medium term and what they really ought to be planning to improve on in the longer term. So hopefully I'll give you some ideas as you come into 2026 on what you might be wanting to look at. By all means, do please comment down below. If you think there are other higher priorities in supply chain and logistics, maybe in particular parts of the world, I'd love to hear from you. If you disagree with some of these, do please comment. But let me get right into this because I don't want to make this too long for you. And I'm going to scribble using my pen here and sort of highlight some of these. So during the last 12 months or so, I always like to look back over the last 12 months and see what have people been asking us to help them with. And let me highlight 4 things that have really been in demand. First of all, facility design, and by that I mean warehouse design. Lots and lots of people wanting to improve the operational efficiency of their warehouses. So a lot of the work is involved in trying to improve an existing facility. Very often it's trying to squeeze more in, trying to increase the capacity, and there's ways of doing that. I mean, there's very simple things. You can reduce aisle widths, you can put in mezzanines, you can do all kinds of things. But a general focus there has been on trying to do more with an existing facility. Picking methodologies. One of the things actually there that's really useful is looking at slotting. I don't know whether you've actually looked at slotting your warehouse. A lot of people do it these days, thankfully. But it's basically making sure that the products are laid out in the warehouse in the most efficient way to minimize the pick path. We've got videos on slotting on the channel, so do have a look at those. So facility design has been a big thing. Lots of people over the last year or 2 are now moving into larger facilities. And we've been working on quite a few where through acquisition, companies maybe have accumulated more warehouses than they need, and it's, you know, they're now consolidating and trying to make the consolidated facility a lot more efficient. So it's a good operational thing to focus on. A lot of people have a lot of inefficiencies still in warehousing. And in fact, I was just thinking there, I'll make a note. Next time around, hopefully next week, I'll do a video on some of the things that we've looked at for improving warehouse efficiency. So look out for that one. But facility design has been a big one again this year. And probably along with that, I've highlighted process improvement. So again, related to facilities, how can we reduce the pick path? How can we make our picking not just more efficient, but more accurate? A lot of people are still worried about, you know, making errors in picking. You wonder why in this day and age, but it comes down to the use of good systems and processes. So that's quite a heavy focus as well, which, you know, I think is a good focus. It's a good thing to focus on. So this is the stuff that people are asking for help with, that they think they need to improve. The next one is probably fleet utilization. And by that, I mean transport fleet. So people are continually wanting to get more efficiency out of their transport fleets, whether that be in-house or outsourced. We've done a lot of work this year actually looking at outsourced transport fleets where companies are trying to reduce the cost. And I always say this, reduce the urge to beat up your transport company to try and just get lower rates. It's not about that. This is, you know, I'm not sort of siding with the transport companies, if you like, but I do have some sympathy. Transport is generally a pretty low margin business. And just attacking the rates is not the way to reduce your cost. It's about making the task less costly to perform. So just think about that for a moment. And we've done some really interesting projects this year, actually, with really ugly freight, building materials and things like that. So it's things like making sure you've got the right fleet size and mix. Have you got the right sort of vehicles to be carrying your loads? Are they well utilized in terms of capacity and time? Are you paying for that transport service in the right way? I'm still coming across companies, and don't beat me up if you think this suits your business, but I'm still coming across companies who are paying hourly rates for transport services. You know, I've said this a few times. I'm not sure that drives efficiency and improved productivity, but, you know, comment if you think I'm wrong. So fleet utilization has been a big one. And then I'm going to do a fourth one, which is outsourcing versus insourcing. Actually, I should, no, I won't. I was going to mention a project, but it's a bit confidential. Outsourcing versus insourcing is still another big one. In a number of ways, people are still looking at the value that they're getting from their outsourced logistics relationships, be that transport or warehousing. And they're trying to make sure that they're getting this sort of continuous improvement focus and a cost down focus. And I've talked to a few companies, even in the last month, actually, here in Australia and overseas, who have this attitude that, oh, we're going to go to market. And it's very often being pushed by a regional headquarters or a global headquarters. We're going to go to market to see if we can do better. And I had a very interesting discussion the other day with a company who had had the same transport provider for many, many years. It was a great service. They thought it was a good cost. They're very happy. Relationship was great. And yet they were being pushed to go to market again. And a word of caution, and I've seen this happen, and this is what I said to this company, just be very careful, because when you go to market like that, where you've got a really good relationship and you're very happy with the costs and so on, but you're being pushed to see, you know, if there's better things out there, it can actually bite you because you may end up with a higher cost. And I have seen that happen. Because the incumbent sees it as an opportunity to review all their cost structures. Very often an incumbent has been doing things as a favour, helping you out and not charging you for them, and it's seen as an opportunity to make sure they recover those sort of costs. So just be careful. And I always say, you know, don't just sort of go to market as a benchmarking exercise. So that's kind of what people have been asking for. We've been doing a lot of work on all these other areas, of course, but these are probably the top four. So if that's what people are asking for, and it's legitimate to try and improve those areas, what are some of the areas maybe that they're missing out on, that they're not focusing on? So let's now focus on what I think people should be doing in the shorter term, let's say over the next 12 months. So if you're happy with your facilities, you're happy with your fleet operations, you're happy with your outsourcing and so on, here are some things that I think people should focus on over the next 12 months. Inventory is a massive one. And I am amazed still at the number of organizations that carry way too much inventory, have very poor forecasting, poor inventory management. And I'm not talking small businesses here, I'm talking multinationals. And you know, multi-billion-dollar businesses. it seems that in some industries, particularly inventory management is still the poor cousin, but it is a massive opportunity to improve efficiency and reduce costs. So what I mean by inventory alignment, I mean, it's as simple as really understanding better your ABCs, making sure that you've got the right stock levels across the range, making sure you got your inventory deployed adequately across the network, so that you haven't got inventory puddling through the network and so on. So inventory alignment is still a big one. Supply chain audits generally, I think in the sort of short to medium term, it's a really good way to just test the water, and you could also call it benchmarking if you like. But it's a good way of testing the water to see if you've got any problems. Is anything actually broken? I tend to think of supply chain audits as being a higher level, sort of quicker and easier thing to do rather than benchmarking, which tends to be quite a detailed process. So, I'll give you some examples again from work that we've done this year. Are we paying too much for our freight? No. Well, maybe in this state you are, this one you're not. Maybe things like the transport contract you've got for this state or this country is a better sort of structured contract than this one. There's some really sort of quick wins that you can get by auditing different parts of your business, whether it be warehousing or transport or inventory even. So supply chain audits are really worthwhile doing. I notice I've got a yellow dot or amber dot up here on facility design as well. So lots of great opportunities. If you're worried about your warehouse inefficiency, that could be something that you could be looking at over the next 12 months. So I would definitely put that in that sort of short to medium term bucket. There's some really easy wins that you can do in terms of layout, use of storage equipment, use of materials handling equipment, simple process improvements. So if you're concerned at all about your warehouse performance, I'd have a look at that. And then my number 4 for the short to medium term is profitability analysis. And again, think of this as a little bit like an audit. In a lot of organizations, they still don't really have a handle on where the profitability lies. I mean, it's staggering to say this, but where the profitability lies in terms of their products and services. Generally, people know which are the high profit ones, which are the high margin ones, but they tend to cover a lot of poorer margin products or negative margin products as well. So I always think, profitability analysis is a good thing to look at. Look right across the range. It's okay to have low margin products and even negative margin products if they're contributing in some way. Maybe they're helping sell high margin products. Maybe you've got to have the full range. There's that old argument that salespeople love. Oh, but we've got to have them in 6 colors, even though we never sell the yellow ones. So that profitability analysis, I think, is another good thing that you can do short term to have a look at boosting profitability of the organization overall. So there's my short and medium term ones. Let me pick on 4 longer term things to look at now. So which 4 shall I pick for longer term? This wasn't too difficult, actually. Where should we start? Let's go over to this side, sourcing and procurement. Definitely a longer term thing to look at. Sourcing has been tricky over the last few years. Single point sourcing, moving to multiple point sourcing countries, looking at how procurement is conducted, the procurement versus the purchasing. I'm still seeing lots of organizations who are buying, and this is getting into more the purchasing angle, but purchasing in rather a strange manner. I was talking to a company only 2 weeks ago, and we were looking at their inventory, and they were buying some products from overseas twice a year. And it's this focus still on lowest unit cost rather than lowest total cost. So, of course, they're filling up their warehouse for half the year with products that, are not going to sell for months. So still a lot of very basic opportunities, I think, in sourcing and procurement. So have a look at that if you're feeling that you're not particularly smart at it. Coming back on the inventory front, I've got to include sales and operations planning. So if your inventory management, your forecasting is somewhat rudimentary, if you've got inventory in balance, in that you're running out of fast movers, that you've got a lot of slow movers, you've got excess stock, all those sort of things. It's a clear indication that you really need to improve. And very often sales and operations planning, or IBP, integrated business planning, is the way to do that. It doesn't have to involve multi-million-dollar systems and complicated processes. It can be done very simply, depending on the size of the business, your product range, the complexity of the business. It can be done quite simply. And that's been something that we've had a lot of requests for, actually, over the last year or so. We've been doing that a lot in Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia particularly, and also recently in North America. So sales and operations planning is a really good one, longer term. And I'm going to have to put in one of my favorites, of course, cost to serve studies, cost to serve analysis. So it's really building on the profitability analysis and getting down into a much more detailed level so that you're understanding the cost of servicing all of your different products, all of your different customers. So it's profitability analysis down to a very detailed level by region, by city, by type of customer, by type of product. And that is probably one of the sort of longer term strategies or analytical approaches that I always recommend to people who are trying to reduce excess cost in their supply chain. Very, very effective. Doesn't have to take too long to do that. And the results generally are staggering because there's a multitude of opportunity that gets hidden by, the big customers who are producing great margins, the main products that are producing great margins, but it hides, all of the non-profitable ones as well. So maybe that's something to look at longer term. And then also a longer term thing to review is the distribution network. It kind of goes together with cost to serve in some ways, because what happens over time is that organizations grow, they contract, they acquire new business, new channels, new products, and over time that distribution network becomes inefficient and inappropriate. We're just talking to a company at the moment that has, I think, this is in Australia, they've got 14 distribution centres, and they're questioning whether that ought to be rationalised. I won't say which industry it's in. You're probably, if you're in Australia, you'll be thinking 14, that's a lot. It all comes down to, the inventory, the service promise, and so on, and they're questioning that. So it's a good sort of longer term thing to look at because obviously it's a much slower burn to make changes there. But distribution network design is a really good long-term one. Okay, so there's my sort of three views of the world, if you like, in terms of supply chain or logistics opportunity. What are we being asked to look at most often? And it's around, facilities and fleet utilization and outsourcing and things like that. Are those necessarily the things that people should be looking at? Or we're being asked to help with those because that's obviously where the noise is, where the squeaky wheel is, where the issues are for those particular organizations. But if you're thinking about, improvement sort of medium term, have a look at some of those sort of audit opportunities, inventory alignment I mentioned, and longer term things looking like profitability and cost to serve and so on. But if I had to pick three, so if you were wondering, what should we look at in 2026? I'm going to pick three, and I hadn't prepared this. I would have to say something around inventory, making sure that you've got your inventory deployed correctly across the network, you've got the balance right, kind of linked with that the procurement is working well, the forecasting. I mean, it's quite a big thing to look at, obviously. But inventory, I think, is a massive opportunity for most organizations. I think we'll have to include warehousing and distribution centers. So whether you're going to look at improving the layouts, whether you're going to look at designing new ones, whether you're going to be looking at process improvements and so on, that would be important. And then a third one. I'm not going to mention the benchmarking or auditing because I've got those as longer term opportunities. But if you really wanted to do something in 2026, no, I would have to actually say, I was going to say something around fleet and outsourcing. Um, but I think I'm going to do a sort of a broader, all-encompassing one and say some sort of audit in functional areas that you're a little bit concerned about. So that could identify, for example, an opportunity or a challenge in your outsourcing contracts. It could throw up something around the fleet and so on. So that'd be my top three. Look at your inventory, look at your warehousing, distribution centers, and if you've got any particular niggles or concerns about particular functions within your supply chain, maybe do a quick audit of those just to see whether it's something that you should be tackling in 2026. So there you go. A bit of a quick gallop around looking at what people are doing, what I think you should be focusing on. Love to hear your thoughts down below. Do please comment either what you're going to be focusing on for 2026. If you think I've missed something vital that really people should look at for 2026, feel free to comment, question what I'm suggesting. I do answer all of the comments myself, so I'd love to see lots of comments. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye for now.